currently in a meeting and isn't joining us. But anyway, thanks to them for the continental breakfast this morning. It's very nice. And of course for the coffee, which is more necessary on day 2 than day 1. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to review the agenda for today. And I also would like to remind everyone that the general sessions are being live streamed and recorded, so be aware of that, and the recordings will be posted on the website. I'd also like to let everybody know that during the breakout sessions, the staff of the Secretariat is going to be busy supporting the various breakout sessions with electronic support and note-taking and other facilities. So there may be periods of time when the staff are not available to answer knocks on the door and let people in. So you have 2 options. The first is knock loud enough so somebody standing out there who isn't a member of the Secretariat staff lets you in. The second is to go to the front desk, which is right around the corner, and ask them, and they will provide you with access to the area if you need to go outside. So today's agenda goes like this. First, in a couple of minutes, we're going to have a committee report on action items, and in this particular case, the committee in question is really a subcommittee. It's the subcommittee that is developing use cases. Then we are going to go into a set of committee breakout sessions for the majority of the morning. This will be from 10 to 11:30, and the committees that are meeting today in breakout sessions are the International Coordination Committee, the Privacy Committee, TIFTM, the Trust Framework and Trust Mark Committee, and the Working Group on Attributes, and they're going to be discussing a new attribute assurance white paper. At 11:30, we will break for lunch. As with yesterday, there are 2 cafeterias. One of them is accessed by going straight that way across the parking lot to Building 500. The other is accessed by going straight that way across the crosswalk into the building across Ellis Avenue. The last hour of the lunch period will be devoted to Birds of a Feather session, so you can get lunch, take it away, and come back to Birds of a Feather sessions. There will be 2 BOFs today, and there will be 2 tomorrow. We're going to describe all of them to you now so that you'll be able to make your decisions about which of the 2 to attend on each day. Then at 1 o'clock, we will have a brief break after the end of the BOF sessions while the room gets converted back to the full plenary configuration. And at 1:15, we're going to have a session that Peter and Kim Sutherland, formerly Kim Little, will be leading, entitled You Say Ecosystem, I Say Framework, What Are We Saying? And this is more of the discussion around what the work items on our agenda for the year will be and what the priorities of those will be. And then again at 2:15 we'll have a break and transition back to committee breakouts. The committee breakouts for the afternoon will be the use case ad hoc group, and we'll be discussing in that group the use case criteria. There will be a meeting of the newly re-energized User Experience Committee. If you're interested in that, I encourage you strongly to attend it. They need to have a pool of active participants to start doing the work. There will be a healthcare committee meeting, and in that meeting, Britton Wanek from Resilient Network Systems will be making a presentation. And then there'll be a joint meeting of the security and TIFTM committees. Those 4 things are parallel from 2:30 to 4. At 4, we will... Is my microphone still on? Yeah, okay. At 4, we will break the main sessions, and at 4:15, once again, we will, as usual, have the chairs meeting and debrief to wrap up the day and see whether there are any items we need to plan for. So, Kay, do we have a social event this evening? No, there's no social event this evening that is planned by us, and therefore there will have to be social events planned by y'all, and there are many opportunities for those around the area. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to go into an overview of the Birds of a Feather sessions. So I will start with the one that's left on my list here. One of the Birds of a Feather sessions tomorrow will be a session on anonymity and pseudonymity. So some of you know Aesthetics. He joined us, I guess now 2 plenaries ago, maybe three plenaries ago, to discuss NIM issues, and in particular issues of pseudonymity in the use of credentials. He's got some updates to discuss and some more issues to talk about in that session. So he'll be leading that session tomorrow during the BOF period. So next, to describe one of today's BOF sessions, I'd like to invite John Mondalt from GTRI to get up and talk about machine understandable trust marks. John. By the way, John Mondalt, our host at the last plenary. Thank you again to GTRI.
No red tickets here. I think I got a slide deck to bring on up. Well, good morning, everybody. Hopefully we get more people later on. We're going to fill this room up here. So here's my 5 minutes to lobby for you guys to come to our Birds of a Feather meeting, and as they bring that up. There's been a lot of talk in the IDESG about trust marks. And as we've talked to the various folks out there in the various different pilot projects, there's a wide range of interpretations of what a trust mark is, what a trust mark isn't, what the value proposition is. And so we decided to do a Birds of a Feather on what we believe a trust mark should be. And they're machine readable trust marks. What we hope to do through each of these IDSGs, and as our pilot matures and we get more into the lessons learned and the concrete artifacts, is to continue this Birds of a Feather session, permission of the IDSG, every time we have one of these and delve down a little bit deeper. I threw together a couple slides, I think, here. What? I'm pointing at this. I don't think my pointing is, there you go. Okay, put together just a couple slides to set the context here. As we think about our identity management and building trust, security, and privacy, the way we think about this has definitely evolved over time. As our needs to share information and build new business models and so forth have evolved, we used to think about this in terms of applications, and our community was the application users. We had application-specific technologies that enable that, and we moved from that to thinking about the enterprise, where we put enterprise VPNs in, virtual directories. Typically, that fell under the umbrella of a single organizational entity. At Georgia Tech, my identity works with all the sites that I have on there, and we have a certain span of control to enable those kinds of technologies. We began to think about this in terms of federations, where you have PKI and SAML and OpenID Connect, and we think about trust frameworks and how they can enable that trust, security, privacy in the context. But typically these federations, like the federation that we run for law enforcement, evolve around a specific community of interest. And as we look forward to the goal and the vision of the NSTIC and ecosystem scale, we need to think a little bit differently about this. We're thinking about this as a cross-sector marketplace, more marketplace-driven. So what are the tools that we have in place and the frameworks and the way to think about this that we don't have today? And we see a lot of promise in thinking about this in terms of trust marks and trust mark frameworks. So that's what we're going to talk about today at the Birds of a Feather. We find ourselves today with a tremendous challenge. We almost have to defy gravity. And so we have competing forces. We have to, on one side, privacy, security, interoperability, and trust. And those are hard in themselves to get in place and get right. But we've got to balance that with scale. We've got to scale across new technologies. We've got to scale across time as things evolve. We've got to scale across communities of interest. And very often we find ourselves setting the bar lower and lower and lower because we just think it's an impossible task for us to accomplish. So keeping in the theme of the canine theme that Jeremy and the identity ecosystem has, we got to look to new tools and new ways of thinking about this. And so we need to bring FIDO or SPOT or whatever in to help us think a little bit differently and what's the new tooling to enable these ecosystems. So we have to defy gravity, so I say we need a little identity ecosystem helium. And maybe that comes from Ken's periodic table, some of that. But we believe the helium is thinking about the problem a little bit differently, to break these monolithic trust frameworks down into reusable components that can be reused and make that market driven. Some of them are going to survive and some of them are not going to survive in the ecosystem. We call those components trust marks. So what we're going to talk about at our Birds of a Feather is the trust mark framework, the technical framework that we're putting together. What does a potential trust mark ecosystem look like? Who are the actors? What are the normative technical specifications that you have to have out there to enable that? Without that framework in place and those normative technical specifications, our concern is that we're going to have trust marks begin to evolve that don't have a place to live. They're going to be orphans. We're going to start creating these trust mark silos. So we need to have that consistent framework for these trust marks to evolve and live in. We're also going to talk about building the right trust marks. So, which ones do we need? Just taking a trust framework and componentizing it isn't the right approach because you don't get reuse. So you need to look across many trust frameworks and many problems and do the right refactoring of those components. So at the Birds of a Feather, we're actually going to walk through some of the ones we're actually building. I'm going to open up the files, going to show you, the ones that we're building that map to FICAM and some other things for our law enforcement federation. So we're going to get into the dirty details of those trust marks at a technical level. And then also, we've captured a lot of lessons learned so far. We're pretty early on in this, but we've learned a lot of things and we've validated a lot of the way we're thinking. So we're going to expose some of those lessons learned. And if you can't make our Birds of a Feather, we have a website out there, trustmark@gtri.gov.edu, which we post all of our artifacts. Sometimes it lags about a month behind what we're working internally, but that's a good place for you to go and take a look at the artifacts, and we'll keep that up to date. Hope you come to our Birds of a Feather. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So that should be on your list for consideration for today. The other thing that will be on your list for consideration today is Jim Shear's session on government mobile security and derived credentials, and Jim is headed up to the podium to discuss the content of that session. Jim.
Thanks, Bob. Sorry, I don't have slides, but I'll just be very brief because I think a lot of you know about the topic. NIST has recently issued a special publication, number 800-157, on so-called derived credentials. And what it really is at a high level is the government thinking about its PIV architecture for federal employees and how to update that and think about how that is best supported in mobile devices, which seem to be the choice of device in this day and age. There's two publications, actually. One, a special pub, and an accompanying NIST interagency report that kind of sketches out at a high level how they're thinking about where mobile fits into the federal architecture. And frankly, it represents a pretty, it's an interesting turning point and an interesting new development, since we're long accustomed in the government to the PIV smart card form factor, but these publications really ask the hard question, if those are not necessarily the friendliest tool or token to use in the preferred mobile device form factor, what should they be looking at? So they are looking at approaches to leverage emerging architectures in mobile phones, like the use of secure elements or micro SD cards, or even storing software tokens in phones to support these applications. So it's the purpose of the Birds of the Feather is frankly just to give a high-level overview of the document on behalf of my colleagues back at NIST, and to hopefully get comments from this community, because this community thinks a lot about security and methods, especially in mobile, and how that's done in the private sector, in the overall economy. And I think there's a lot of great lessons to be learned there that we can help inform NIST of. And so I encourage you to submit comments, which are due April 21st. So an overview, interesting discussion, I think, on that transition, and I hope you'll join me, and I hope I can interest you in providing NIST with comments and good information. So thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Kay, do you know whether we have Daza on the line? Okay, so the other session tomorrow is a session that Daza Greenwood will be leading on big data and identity. He has some outside experts, including, I believe, Danny Weitzner, who pays a lot of attention to privacy issues surrounding the use of data, and a few others. That'll be a session with remote participants, which Daza will be moderating. So I think that one ought to be pretty interesting, and you will be choosing between that one and the anonymity and pseudonymity discussion for your buff entertainment tomorrow. So that is the summaries of the Birds of a Feather session alternatives that you have. And with that, we're done with the main room session for this morning, and we will take a break, and I'll note almost exactly on. Oh, wait, we won't take a break? Oh.
If you recall, I believe on the agenda, isn't there a use case?
Oh,
Ad
you're
hoc
right.
Committee report before we.
I'm crazy. Yes, there is a committee report from the use case committee next on the agenda, and we will do that before we take a break. So, who do I? Jim. Okay, Jim, welcome to the stage for the update. Sorry for leaving you off the mental agenda.
It would have been fine. Let's see. Oh, we have. I didn't realize we had a monitor up there, so I brought my own. And then this thing. Oh. Oh. Oh, it's on. It says on. It's not moving any slides though. Oh, there it goes. That's great. So, good morning, everybody. I'm Jim Fenton. I'm actually the Privacy Committee liaison to the Use Case Ad Hoc Group. I'm here for Brian Russell, who is, I suspect, on the line somewhere. But we thought it would be a little bit more effective to have a live presenter. So the slides were put together by Brian, and I have the honor of presenting them. So a little bit of history. Scott Shorter had been chairing the Use Case Ad Hoc Group for quite some time. He recently had to go off to other responsibilities. Kathy Tilton picked it up in an interim period, and then Brian Russell has recently agreed to take on chairing the ad hoc group, which is wonderful. So we've gone through a little bit of a transition, and what we're doing is, we've come up with a use case life cycle, which is something that I'll be presenting in a couple of slides here, and we got contribution of quite a number of use cases, and if you're interested in looking at them, they're all on the wiki. That's our primary tool for organizing and working through these things, although as we've sort of compiled them into a form for a more final review, we've essentially cut and pasted some of those use cases that we have under consideration into a Word document to circulate, to make it a little bit easier so that they're in one place. The use cases that we had contributed came from a lot of different places, and we had a template which was very good, but there was a lot of variety in the use cases that we initially had contributed. Some of the use cases had very complete descriptions of what the problem was that they're trying to solve. In some cases had a great deal of information about how the problem might be solved. Other use cases were kind of more sort of placeholders, like, well, I won't pick on anything in particular, but a title and maybe a brief description of something that the identity ecosystem ought to be able to address, but really not a whole lot further. And so we had to go through and pick these use cases for initial consideration. And one of the, we've learned a lot about the process for choosing them, and that will actually our meeting later today will be talking a lot about the process going forward for choosing use cases for further consideration. But it really helps to have a champion for the use case, preferably the author of the use case, very involved in the committee, because sometimes it's just hard to hard to have an advocate for the use case in some situations if we don't have that capability. So we've taken a set of use cases, reviewed them in our committee, come up to a working draft, and we're currently on the third stage of the process that I'll show you in the next slide, which is the committee review. We've gotten some comments from the Management Council, which we appreciate, working on the disposition of those. The Privacy Committee has, through the process, been somewhat involved in reviewing use cases, and one of the sections of the use case template is privacy considerations. So up to this point, the Privacy Committee, being kind of the subject matter experts in that area, have been contributing text to the privacy considerations. That's somewhat of a different somewhat of a different thing from the actual privacy review, because there are situations that you could think of where maybe a use case describes something that is inherently not privacy respecting. So there still is a privacy review, but we've gotten some input there, and we've also received some initial comments from the Security Committee. And next slide, please. There we go. Thank you. So here's our life cycle. It's a little bit of an eye chart. I apologize for that, but you've seen charts like this in other from other committees as well. So there's the contributions, a working draft, and we're basically in column 3 of this chart with the initial use cases that we've chosen to go forward. Then after this point, actually, kind of we're in the process of compilation as well. As I mentioned, we're kind of bringing these into copying a lot of these off of the wiki and circulating them for further review. And then, of course, they will go through the usual approval process from the Management Council and from the Plenary before they're published. Here's kind of another view of the whole process, kind of a flow chart with the big red "You are here" arrow. And I think we can go on to the next one. So what we need to do next is to complete getting the committee reviews, particularly the Privacy Committee, because of the requirement for privacy review of deliverables, but not limited to privacy. Other things like, particularly the Security Committee, need to review the use cases as well, and then submit them for approval to the Management Council and Plenary, and that's kind of described here in the details. Let me talk. Since we're way early at this point, I hope you don't want me to talk until 9:45 as the schedule says.
You may use your discretion about how.
Oh, good, thank you. Bob says I may use my discretion, so it'll be short. One of the things that the use cases, of course, are trying to describe problems that we hope that the identity ecosystem will solve. The kinds of representative things that people would want to do with a working identity ecosystem. In a lot of cases, we get contributions of contributions describing the way in which a problem might be solved, kind of more of an architectural diagram, like here's the data flow and all that sort of thing. And we have accepted some of that basically as a non-normative example of here is an existence proof that shows a way to solve the problem. We don't expect the use cases to dictate. In fact, the use cases should not, at least in my opinion, dictate how these problems are solved. I think it is useful to have an illustration of how the problem could be solved. Here's one way that people solve this problem, just as an example of if people say, well, there isn't a way to achieve that, we can include that information in the use case. But really what we're trying to do is trying to get a representative set of hopefully fairly diverse use cases that describe important problems that we would like the identity ecosystem to solve. And with that, I'll ask if there are any questions. Yes?
Yeah, Jim, if you could...
I'll repeat the question either. Oh, you got one nearby.
Jim, if you could flip back to the steps of where the use case development is. And I want to...
I'm not sure. There we go.
Or you could.
This one or the one after that?
The one after that.
Okay.
Where we are.
There we are.
Okay. So yesterday we had a discussion on the functional model and the functional elements. And one of the things that Bob did was kind of call to task folks that have developed or are in the process of developing use cases to kind of superimpose that use case on those functional elements to see, are the needs, the functional needs of those use cases, I won't say being addressed, but can they find their place in those functional elements and that draft functional model, with the idea that the functional model is not solutions. So these aren't solutions on how to implement the use case, but are the functions that are laid out in the functional elements are they addressing what the use case would need from a functional standpoint? So my question is there a place on this flow where that particular activity could be performed? Well, and that's first question. Second is, who might do that? The subcommittee or the ad hoc committee or the use case developer or the security group that kind of laid out the functional model? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we have a lot of things going on in parallel, and that's one good example. The other example that I can think of, since I've been somewhat involved in it, was the taxonomy ad hoc group's work in developing a glossary to describe things in the identity ecosystem. And it would be really, ideally, we would have the use cases and everything that we describe aligned with that glossary, so that we're using the same terminology. And we have, there's some challenges because the work's going on in parallel, and we need to work on tweaking the wording of the use cases in general for that. Now, in the example that you give, I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage because I'm not as familiar with the functional model work, and I took yesterday's call to action to review the functional model stuff seriously. That's something that I need to do as well. I tend to think of the functional model as being somewhat more structural, and the use case work as being somewhat more functional. That's not the right word. Functional model. Somewhat more oriented around the problems that we're trying to solve. And so I guess I don't see quite as much, if we're doing the use cases right, the use case will describe the problem, and if there's an example there of how the problem might be solved in the use case, that should really use the functional model to describe it. But in other cases where we don't have that kind of implementation detail, if you will, then the functional model stuff is probably less of a conflict.
Thanks. Yeah, I wasn't putting you on the spot on that, but it would seem to me that the management council in the approval brackets would ask that question, which is, well, all right, does the does either the ad hoc committee or the owner of this that originated the use case, or maybe even the security group that's working on the functional model, do they see that this use case is being addressed by the functional model work and the functional elements that are being developed? That would seem to be like a step in order for the management council to say, okay, well, this is fitting the model that we're advancing in our, and then review other elements. But that would seem to be one of the questions that they would ask.
Yeah, well, and like I said, there are a lot of these overlaps that, because the work is happening in parallel and not serially, that we're going to need to address in a lot of these deliverables. Any other questions, or any questions online?
Actually, I have a comment from Brian Russell. Can I share that?
Please.
With you? He doesn't ask a question, but he says, we would hope that the security committee would perform the mapping to the functional model. He added that, so.
Okay. So, thank you.
Thanks very much, Jim. Don't forget your laptop, because I'll just sell it if you do. So, yes, Denise, you wanted to ask a question? Okay, go ahead and make a statement. There's a microphone right there. Let's make sure it's on.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name's Denise Talo. I'm with Privo, and we're one of the NSTIC winners from this past year. As part of our pilot, we are educating people about online privacy. We're in the children's online privacy business. So we have some brochures or little handouts that just talk a little bit about what our pilot is all about in case anyone's interested. And please come get a sticker and demonstrate that online privacy matters by putting a sticker on your badge. And thank you very much.
Or you could even put a sticker on your computer. A long-standing tradition in the identity community. Okay, so now, as I erroneously stated earlier, it actually is time for us to take a break and then move to committee breakouts. It looks like we'll have a little bit of extra time for committee breakouts. And if you finish the committee breakouts early, you can take advantage of the opportunity to maybe get lunch. Well, actually, yes, you can take advantage of the opportunity to get lunch a little early if you go that way rather than that way. This cafeteria opens at 11. This one opens at 11:30. So if you go early, go that way. And that'll give you some extra time to eat before you get to the BOF sessions. So I'll adjourn the full meeting now. Oh, yep, sorry.
Go ahead. Jack, did you have some?
I was just going to ask,
Hold on.
Well, I was going to ask that too. What do you want me to tell the remote people? Because there's a lot of people that think it doesn't start until 10, so they probably weren't planning to log in until 10. I'm not
okay.
sure how to get the word out.
Probably a good point, yes, that we probably ought to wait until the appointed hour. So I suppose that the right thing to do is, at this point, to ask whether there are any other matters that anybody would like to discuss for the next 30 minutes or so, and if not, I can have you speak among yourselves. Is there anything that anyone thinks it would be productive for us to talk about, given that we have a little bit of extra time here? Oh, yes. So unfortunately, Jeremy is in another meeting, or Peter and I were going to ask him to demonstrate his breakdancing skills, which he talked to us about last night. There were a lot of us who spent time in Michigan at the table. It's the only way I'll explain that. Anything anyone would like to bring up at the moment? There being apparently nothing, I will release you to an extended break. You may discuss items of interest among yourselves, and at 10, we will reconvene for the committee breakouts. Thanks very much.